I will call the May 27th regular town council meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, so just item 4, proclamations and presentations, and we do have a proclamation here and a few people to accept that proclamation honoring the Rockville Fish and Game Club on its 100th anniversary. So I'll read the proclamation or citation, I should say, aloud, and then if we want to come up for a picture, that would be great. So, founded in 1925, the Rockville Fish and Game Club has been a member-owned and community-focused sportsman club dedicated to promoting outdoor activities, including hunting, fishing, recreational shooting, and archery. The club spans across Tolland and Vernon, with additional property in Crystal Lake and Ellington, providing an enriching outdoor experience for over 1,200 members and their families from Tolland, Vernon, Ellington, and surrounding communities. The Rockville Fish and Game Club remains steadfast in its mission to uphold and enforce fish and game laws, promote conservation, protect wildlife, preserve open spaces, advocate for access to fishing, hunting, and camping, support legislation beneficial to sportsmen, and encourage ethical sportsmanship and cooperation with landowners. The club actively sponsors educational programs and events for its members, youth, women, and the greater community, emphasizing safe firearm handling, hunter education, and responsible outdoor practices. For a century, the Rockville Fish and Game Club has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to fostering a strong community of outdoor enthusiasts while ensuring the preservation of natural resources for future generations. Now, therefore, I, Jacob Murray, on behalf of the citizens of Tolland, honor and recognize the Rockville Fish and Game Club for contributing positively to the Tolland community for 100 years and running. Then we have, I believe, Diana Reed, president of Fish and Game Club, along with Greg Thomas and Sally Lucas, who are our vice president and life member, respectively, as well as Mark Schmidt, who is a member here to accept the citation. Like we can take a quick picture. And would you like to say any words first?
Oh, no, thank you so much for doing this. I'm Diana Reed, and we have been around a long time, and we really are trying to do our best to be good stewards of our property, and also to youth. We do a lot with our youth in terms of different types of education. We sponsor scouting units and things like that. So we're happy to be recognized by the Tolland Town Council. Thank you very much.
Congratulations on 100 years.
Thank you.
What, we could come up here?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, you look great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll bite.
No, I didn't do it. Next is yes.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, really? Wonderful. Glad to hear that.
Right. So that brings us to item 5, which is public petitions, communications, and public participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council with a 2-minute limit. So that, is there anybody who would like to have public participation? Online. Go to the room. Line. Room one more time. Online one last time. Close out public participation. All right. Item 6.1 is a public hearing item, consideration of a resolution making an additional appropriation of $344,656 from the general fund unassigned fund balance and approve the tentative settlement of 3 pending legal claims filed with the Connecticut Workers' Compensation Commission concerning the death of Dennis Carlson, which must be approved by a workers' compensation administrative law judge, and further authorize the town manager and the town council in such manners to execute any documents necessary to achieve the tentative settlement. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All right, any discussion? We are hybrid tonight, so we'll do a roll call vote. Councilor Buckler,
Aye.
Councilor Yudichak.
Aye.
Councilor Moran,
Aye.
Councilor Beebe.
Aye.
Aye as well, so the public hearing is open. There's no time limit for a public hearing, so I'll go to the room first. Go online. Back to the room. Go online. Go to the room one last time. Online one last time. Right, not seeing any public comment tonight. We can do it one motion, to close the public hearing in about, resolution, yes, not the resolution.
So moved.
All right, so move to close the public hearing and adopt the resolution.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Great, Councilor Butler? Go back to Councilor Butler, Councilor Yudichak.
Aye.
Councilor Moran,
Aye.
Councilor Beebe,
Aye.
Councilor Butler,
Aye.
thank you. I'm an aye as well, so that resolution passes. Right, now we'll go to reports of boards and committees responsible to the council. So I'll go to Firehouse Subcommittee first. Is there any updates?
No.
I do understand that you, even though ARPA is dissolved, you did have a
Yeah,
ARPA-esque update.
so Brian's permission, set up so I can meet with Scott over the new parks, facility, seeing $1 million came out of ARPA to put that up. It's coming along really well. It's target date, I believe, is October. Yeah, Megan's doing a great job helping Scott with that. And basically it's one big garage where they can put all their stuff outdoors right now. If they need to put a truck in there, and eating facility, which they did not have in the other one, and offices or office. So it looks great, and it's looks like it's going up pretty quick. So I just wanted to let everybody know it's going along, and hopefully it gets done in October for the council and the public.
Thank you. Brian, any updates from EHHD or CROG?
And we had a meeting, no, I gave the update on CROG at the last council meeting, that we're at, so no nomination. Our letter went out as far as the saltwater task, the contaminated wells task force.
Yeah.
We have not heard back from anyone other than our local state rep, Tammy, and Joe did mention it in the conversation that we had, that she has received it, so.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's any boards and committees. So we'll go to reports of town council liaisons. Councilor Buckler, go to you first.
I don't have anything.
Thank you. Councilor Yudichak. Board committees.
I really don't. I believe we all got an email that Bruce wants to resign, which is he's, I'll just say he was a great employee and great on the recreation committee and devoted a lot of time. And I think personally, probably for the town, would be a big.
Absolutely. Yeah, going on to other opportunities. So very exciting for him and definitely a loss for Tolland. Councilor Moran.
The Historic District Commission met last Wednesday. I wasn't able to go because of our budget meeting. But I did look at the minutes, and they had a discussion regarding some minor adjustments to the UCC's solar installation. There were no issues with that. They also had a discussion about whether to remove the expiration date on COAs. They decided not to remove those expiration dates, so they could sort of keep an eye on things. And then the last thing was that there was a discussion for a crosswalk in the area of 89 Tolland Green. Working with Brian and Scott Lappin, I believe that the DPW is going to paint like a temporary sidewalk until things with the sidewalk are all finalized. So that's a good, at least temporary fix. So
It's pretty jacked up over there. To do a temporary fix we're hoping to get when we do the full sidewalks. Our plan was to incorporate the ADA components over there to get it to St. Matthews, really connect St. Matthews. Again, we want to connect St. Matthews all the way to our business district eventually.
Part of our larger plan too.
Yep.
We'll talk a little bit later. Yep. Councilor Shay, any board committee updates?
No, nothing to report.
Okay. Councilor Beebe?
So there was no planning and zoning meeting yesterday because it was Memorial Day. So there's only one meeting this month. There will be a meeting in June, and there is a public hearing coming up that it deals with rear lots and could have a significant effect on the residential design district in town. So it's applicable townwide, and they're talking about reducing the required acreage for rear lots from 5 acres to 2 acres and reducing the frontage requirement as well. So that's something that people should take an interest in and take a look at.
Thank you. And I don't have any updates to report. Like Councilman Randall, a lot of my budget meetings that are being scheduled over them, but just haven't had any meetings. All right, that brings us to new business, which our first item is a presentation by Steve Knight from Fitch and Associates for our public safety study. So I'll turn it over to Brian and Steve to tee this one up. I believe there's a presentation that will be.
Sure. Mike Wilcox here, who worked with Steve Knight throughout this process to do a public safety consultant study on our needs. It took a long time. There was some things that delayed toward the end, but now Steve Knight's here, and you know, he asked to push it out, but thank him for being here tonight. So thank you. Go ahead, Steve, or if Mike, you have anything. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Let me go ahead and try to share my screen here. How is that? Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, good evening. Nice to be with you tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you. I have about a 20-minute presentation plus questions, if that's acceptable, or do I need to speed it up?
We got a light agenda, so we can use 20 minutes. That's good.
Okay, great. So again, Steve Knight from Fitch and Associates. We're going to walk through kind of a high-level summary of our report that we provided. What we're going to touch on tonight briefly is just a little bit about our firm, the top 8 focus areas that we had on the front page of your report, talk about the executive summary and some of the key findings, and then roll into the summary of the findings and recommendations, and then be happy to answer any questions that you have after that. So a little bit about Fitch and Associates. We've been around for 40 years this year as a public safety consulting firm. I've been with the firm for 10 years, retired out of the fire and EMS services. I worked for the International City County Managers Association for a couple of years before I joined Fitch and Associates. Along the way, my personal background, I have a PhD from the University of South Florida, master's in public administration, and then my bachelor's is in fire and safety engineering. So the top 8 focus areas for consideration, and we tried to keep it really broad for understanding that policy is set at the local level. So we tried to frame everything with plenty of flexibility for the policy group to navigate. So the top 8 focus areas are mitigating coverage gaps and differentiated performance. And we're really that's gonna be one of the core issues, is what's the sensitivity to the differentiation between service and performance that occurs within the system today. A risk-based consideration for each of the 4 station areas. Single staff station solution that is centrally located within the township. We talked about additional administrative capacity, any improvement or installation of the current ISO rating, depending on potential changes, considerations for improvement in recruitment and retention. We did review the capital facilities and mobile apparatus. And then, of course, we have short, mid, and long-term implementation strategies for the substantive policy options with costs. So the project deliverables, as the town administrator kind of framed for us, we had a quantitative data analysis report, a GIS station location report, a community risk assessment report, and then all of the key elements out of those were brought into the summary report that I'm sure that you were provided ahead of time. So let's talk a little bit about the current deployment. So if you look at the top right with the red and blue, what that is the hourly demand for services on average that start at midnight all the way to the left and go all the way back to midnight at the 2300 hour all the way to the right. And what it shows is a pretty typical form for the overnight period being a lot less frequency of community requests for service versus during the middle of the day. And the blue line you can see are EMS related, and the red is fire related activity. The little tips up there in green are really all the other things like rescue and hazmat and other calls like that. What the department has done really, really well is if you look at the figure that's all dark blue columns, what that really shows is the department's leadership's attempt to take their limited resources they have and align them the best they could with the periods that had the greatest demand for services. So you can see nights and weekends don't really have any coverage, but starting at 6 a.m., there might be 3 people on duty. At 8 a.m., there might be 5 people on duty. Then you get up to 8, and then it comes back down. So you can see they're attempting very well, actually, to address the peak periods the best they could with the limited staffing that they had. So the department did a really good job with that strategy. The limitation of the design, however, is that differentiated performance occurs during the unstaffed time. And we'll kind of walk through that on this slide. So if you look at, so let's just have a couple definitions. Turnout time is the time that it takes from once the crews are alerted that there's an incident to respond to until they're on the radio and identify that they're actually en route and responding to a call. The travel time is just the drive time. So once they say they're going to a call until they arrive is the orange column. And then the green column is the total response time from the time that they're alerted until the time that they arrive. And these are all at the 90th percentile, which is, it's not the average. It's a much higher validity measure if you're not familiar with it. But what I want to draw your attention to is the non-staffed hours. The total time to make it on scene at the 90th percentile during the non-staffed hours is as high as 22 minutes. But during your staffed period, you're right around 14. So your configurations of 3 units, whether or not you have 2 units, gets a little longer for the response time, the total response time than when you're staffed, and your 3-unit staffing and your other staffed hours. So you can kind of just compare and contrast and see the difference that the community receives during the nights, weekends, and some of your town holidays. So a lot of the conversation we're going to have tonight really comes down to risk and your policy choices about whether or not how sensitive you are to those kinds of changes. So the turnout time in particular, the staffed resources, and this is something we had a discussion with, we know that the chief is currently evaluating and working on. But during the staffed periods, the turnout time should be about 1.5 minutes. And right now it's a little longer, upwards around 4 minutes. Now, some of the staffed hours might be conflated a little bit with the data because even though it's a staffed hour, a non-staffed resource might have had to take a call. So there might be some idiosyncrasies in the data in the background. That's why the department is continuing to look at it and try to refine that down, both from a performance perspective as well as making sure that the data is reflective of the true experience. And then also under the current configuration, because there are times with fewer resources available, human capital, personnel, there, the department has single person responses. And our recommendation from a safety perspective and industry best practice is really to work to eliminate single person responses as part of the solution. And then the other aspect associated with this is to reduce the number of responding resources to EMS calls. What we found was at a fairly frequent percentage of time, all of the resources, regardless of whether they're at one station or staffed at two different stations, co-responded to the majority of the calls. So there's an opportunity as you right-size the staffing to start to decrease how often you send multiple resources to the same call, especially for EMS calls that aren't high acuity or super emergent, like a cardiac arrest or penetrating trauma or something along those lines. So looking at it from a risk perspective, we looked at, if you had a chance to see the report or the risk assessment, we looked at all kinds of socioeconomic and demographic variables, as well as the call volume and how often calls were happening at the same time. So we kind of put that all together in a risk management or a risk matrix. And what we found is your stations 240 and 140 were moderate risk stations, and the other two stations, 340 and 440, were low risk. What that really supports is the current strategy of attempting to staff 140 and 240 and leave the other stations generally unstaffed and much more reliant on the volunteer contingency in order to respond. The data certainly supports it from a risk perspective. If you look at the figure on the right, it really shows those red kind of highlighted areas are where the highest concentration of calls are occurring, and the majority of your calls are also occurring between 240 and 140. So the current strategy, if the idea is to attempt to staff two stations, is pretty well founded in the data as well. So when we looked at your fire station locations and your response time capabilities, something that we wanted to point out and really reinforces the previous assessment is this is called a marginal utility assessment. And we look at each station's ability to capture calls within a 10-minute drive time, which is your current performance. And what it shows is if you go to station 240, for example, it could capture 1,622 of your calls, which would be about 83% of all the calls could be captured from that single station. When you add station 140 to the mix, they contribute not another 83%, but about another, 8% or 9% there to get it up to about 92% overall. And then you see station 340 and 440 add a diminishing return, if you will, because this is all cumulative percentage. So you see your return on investment is 4% for 440 and maybe less than 1.5% to 2% for 340. So the policy option of attempting to staff all four stations, while there's certainly nothing wrong with that, but with limited resources, I would compliment the township and the department on their strategy thus far on attempting to only staff those two stations that get you the greatest return on investment. So overall, you're very much on the right track. And 240 and 140 will get you 92% of all the calls within 10 minutes. So what we also looked at, because we know a lot of the options have a price tag and competing policy interests associated with them, one of the things we wanted to look at is what if we slowed down a little bit? Is there a threshold where we could slow down the response time and realize some efficiencies and cost avoidance for the township? And what we looked at is if you slow down from 10 minutes to 11 minutes on your travel time, you would only have to staff station 240 here in the red, and all of the green is what would be accomplished within 10 minutes of or 11 minutes, I'm sorry, of station 240. And that would capture 91% of all the calls that occur within the township. So in the short and midterm policy options that we put together, a 2-unit configuration can be utilized if you're deploying for a single station. So there is an efficiency to be had by looking at getting to a single station solution. In this example, it had to slow the system down, which sometimes has a negative policy option or perception with that for the community. So a lot of communities are hesitant to slow the system down. They usually want to maintain current performance or improve. The good news is that we were able to look for an alternative location of a single station. And if you centralized a station, the red square here, then you could get back to your current 10-minute travel time, which is what it is today, but also enjoy the efficiencies of a single station solution that's centrally located. So it's a pretty good option from a long-term planning standpoint for you to have one single location. It cuts down on the overall resource commitment to the degree that you're acceptable with that. And then you're 10 minutes by deploying a single staffed and centralized location. Now, you would still need at least 2 units to do it. And we're going to walk through in more detail how many resources. But even though you have two stations, just to put it very easily, if you were to staff two stations, you would need at least 3 resources. If you staff a single station, then you could get by with at least a minimum of 2 resources, but there's better options that we'll talk about in a few minutes. So we also want to be sensitive to what's the consideration for ISO and ISO rating. I know that anytime you consider different alternatives with the current station footprint or how many stations you have applied, there's always the opportunity for the ISO and the insurance ratings to be impacted. What we did is one of the major tenets, if you will, of the ISO is that the built upon property is within 5 road miles of a station. So what we looked at is looking at the new location that we proposed. The analysis confirms that station is operationally sufficient and can cover 80% of the community within 5 road miles. Now, I'll say that's also conservative from the standpoint that that's 5 road miles, or I should say 80% of the totality of the township, where ISO is a little more restrictive, saying it has to be built upon area. And the GIS that we had in the background did not have sufficient detail for us to tell what was built upon, what wasn't, et cetera. So if you maintain the volunteer stations of 140, 340, and 440, that would round out coverage for the remaining 20%. And you can see these other colors are what those stations would provide. On the border, all of the green areas, what the primary station and the centralized station would provide. It also found that if you look at the proximity of 240, station 240 is nearly 100% duplicative to the new station location, and there wouldn't be any reason to continue to maintain or entertain that location like you might consider 140, 340, and 440. So then we looked at, okay, so if there's any potential changes, and ISO does have a proprietary process. So you can't always know everything that's going to occur in the background when they do their evaluations, but we can make some pretty educated guesses along the way. I looked at your last rating and kind of combined in. There are certain things that you don't have 100% control over or are extremely costly to move the pendulum. Okay, so you have communications where, the current score is 6.25, the maximum score is 10. So there's some opportunity to improve the town's rating along there. That's only 10% of the overall score, though. The fire department is 50% of the overall score. And a lot of the points are associated with company personnel. And we're going to talk about that tonight, but that is a costly endeavor in order to improve. Under the management umbrella, though, is the training component, and that's largely a management activity with its record keeping, its frequency of training, multi-training, things like that, but largely a very, very low cost to no cost option where you could really focus your efforts on the training and move the current training value that you have of 2.11, and the maximum value for training is 9. So that would improve this overall fire department score along the way. Water supply, of course, is actually a pretty good score, but obviously investing in the infrastructure for that is a very costly endeavor. So we thought that if there was any concern or sensitivity to the ISO rating and any implication with any changes, then you could shore up your exposure by focusing on some low cost areas that will help improve the overall rating. Next thing we looked at is the administrative capacity. Our primary recommendation, and I don't need to spend a lot of time on this, is that we believe that it would be in the township's best interest to restore the full-time assistant chief's position that used to occur, and that will have some downstream benefit specifically for the fire marshal's office, but also for the chief to better distribute the administrative workload across the organizational structure. So we thought that was a good immediate short-term investment to move the pendulum on that. So as we move into the policy considerations, if you had a chance to look at the report, we just wanted to frame out, again, understanding that policies at the local level, we understand that. We as a firm don't want to be overly prescriptive about what agencies must or must not do. It's really a matter of risk tolerance in what you're willing, looking at the balance, for example, of how much protection you can and want to purchase versus how much risk you're willing to absorb. So on this policy consideration page, where we really, and there would technically be nine different combinations, but we're just trying to paint the picture of how to consider your policy options. So for example, the primer on this, or the stem, is really about the inconsistency of the staffing strategy as it is today to have a commensurate level of service for nights, weekends, days, et cetera. So understanding that's kind of the primer. If the perceived risk for the township is low on this top row here, if the perceived risk of having a differentiated performance is low, and the town's policy group is relatively your tolerance to risk is high, that would mean that you really wouldn't need to make an intervention, right? So if you have a low risk combined with a high tolerance to risk, then your policy option may be to continue with the status quo. If you deem the differentiated performance as a moderate level of risk, not low, but not, immediate crisis, but you also had a moderate risk to the tolerance, saying, okay, this is probably something that we should address in a timely manner, but it doesn't have to be done yesterday, but we don't want to postpone it, too long in the future. Then we put together some strategies of how you could have some more consistent staffing, but kind of stair step or scaffold how you get from point A to point B before you are fully career 24/7. And then if you perceive it as high risk and you have a very low risk to tolerance, which means that you perceive it as a real issue and you don't have a lot of capacity to weather that for any period of time, then you might have a little bit more aggressive strategy of how you would get to deploying 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So we just kind of built out a kind of a framework of how to address it as we roll into the summary of what we put together. Now, the reason I put that slide in before this is just a primer from the standpoint that we tried to build the recommendations of the alternatives from a standpoint that you would want to address these issues, but we tried to build it out over a longer period of time. So just understand the frame that we're introducing this. So under the immediate initiatives, we had hire a full-time assistant chief, redistribute the administrative workload, and begin evaluating a single station solution. Under the short-term initiatives, which we deemed as 1 to 3 years, it's nothing scientific about it, but provide staffing to deploy 2 units 7 days a week, including holidays, for 12 hours a day. So that would be the incremental improvement from, missing out the weekends and the holidays. That would take a minimum of 5 personnel per day and a total of 12.5 FTEs, which is about 4 to 5 or 4.5 FTEs more than you have today. On the midterm initiatives, and say 4 to 7 years, you could provide coverage by deploying one of the following scenarios. You could have 3 units 7 days a week, including holidays, for the 12 hours, a minimum of 7 personnel per day. Or you could have 2 units 24/7 all year long with a minimum of 5 personnel per day. Both alternatives require the same FTE count of 17.5 FTEs, which is 5 more than if you followed the short-term investment. So if you were scaffolding, it would be about 5 more, but the total FTE count would be 17.5 at that point. If you moved for the long-term initiatives, which we deemed somewhere between 8 and 20 years, you would open and move into a new centrally located station, provide 24/7 coverage by deploying one of the following: either 2 24-hour units and 1 12-hour unit for a week. That would account for 22.5 FTEs, and 3 units 24/7 with a daily minimum staffing of 7, which would require 24 FTEs. So you can see that if you had 2 units 24 hours a day and 1 peak unit, you save about 2.5 FTEs in that configuration, or you could move all the way for everybody is on a 24/7 365. So that kind of frames out how we go from immediate to long term with the general initiatives that we try to provide. Now, if you followed that same strategy, we built out a summary table to show you what the average work week of each configuration would be, the daily minimum staffing of each configuration, total FTEs, net new FTEs over the current, and then net impact to the general fund. So if you went all the way to full fruition of the long-term strategies, then that would be somewhere around 1.9 to 2.4 million net new impact to the general fund over that long-term period. And then, just for the sake of, if you followed progressing from immediate to short-term to midterm to long-term, there's a stair-stepped investment that kind of shows you how you get from point A to point B on the implementation strategy. And one thing I wanted to point out with this as well, and I put it in the report, is this is also a little conservative from the standpoint that the current configuration pays all overtime at time and a half. And largely, I'm sure that was a generated from the standpoint of what the work week is currently. But FLSA for firefighters allows a 7K exemption where overtime isn't necessary until after somewhere around 52 or 53 hours, depending on what your work cycle is. So this is a little overstated from the standpoint that all overtime from the current schedule to 56 hours a week is all considered to be time and a half. And if you followed the Fair Labor Standards Act and readdress that in a different manner, negotiated that, then you might be able to soften some of that overtime cost along the way for the schedule. And then the last piece is we always recommend working through if these options have any merit and resonate with the council, then certainly putting together some kind of a strategic plan of how you get from point A to point B, the timelines, et cetera, are always a good management tool in order to navigate those possible changes. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for walking us through the study. So go to the council for questions. Are there any questions from councilors?
I don't really have questions, but I've met with,
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've met with Steve a few times, known him a couple of times, and he's been very helpful, in answering questions, and I think, Steve, this was a pretty good overview, because the packet or whatever we got has a lot of information in it, and I think no matter what, that this study is valuable to the community and for the fire department. And it seems like some things are already being worked on within the fire department, and some things don't come at a cost, so I look forward to making our fire department stronger. It's gonna take a long time, but I believe we can eventually get somewhere. So, thank you, Steve, for doing it. I know it took a long time. I'm waiting for like 14 months for this report, but I think it's really valuable and was worth what we paid for. I don't have any specific questions because I mentioned a lot of them to meetings or have to set my fair share with Steve, so.
Counselor Yudichak? So I'll have a couple of comments in that question. So the first question, this is actually probably more to Brian and our fire chief, if I may, which is, have there been any steps taken to try to reduce the response time? Is there anything operationally that we can do, in the immediate term, to help with those statistics?
Yeah, that was concerning, when I read it. Met with the chief. We spoke at length about, addressing it. He assures me, it has, been addressed, and even out of, TN, I spoke with the assistant director there about it, as it was a concern as well, and, they assure me that that'll improve.
That's good, yeah.
And I have full confidence that it will as well.
I think that's good, and I have confidence in our fire department as well. The second thing is, I think this study has a ton of great information in it, and it's gonna take some time just to digest it. This is a lot of material up in here. One thing, whenever we pay for a study like this, that I'm concerned about is making sure that it doesn't end up sitting on a shelf and collecting dust. Again, kind of more a question to our town manager and our professional staff here. Is there plans to try to incorporate this study up into like our capital planning and any of our other regular planning processes, so that we continue to work on implementing recommendations as appropriate?
I'd love to implement them all. We just don't have financial viability to implement any. That being said, I embrace the idea of a single station in town. That will likely lower the apparatus needed to cover it, a new single station. I've asked our town planner to start looking at moving in this direction. That involves a very valuable piece of property that we all know is the Station 240 and the training center. That we'd like to get a business in there and sell it, and then we're looking at different land ideas. This is a major concept. That'll take a lot of planning, and it starts with our town planner, and of course Dave does an excellent job of this stuff. I, for lack of a better way, pulled out of the hat in the next 10 years, I'd like to move to that. Just looking at the expense of a fire station. And basically an EMS center. That being said, we have Megan the magician here who makes money appear often, and we'll watch for grants as they become available, and I'd love to pay for any portion of it via grant. And then we can poke around state bonding as well. But it's a big venture developing that key piece of property on Route 195. Or that I just spoke of. So it's a lot to take in, and we'll look at moving in that direction. And I think we all kind of agree that's a good way to go. If we can get, we have land in town that the town already owns that we think is viable. But it's gonna take engineering studies, architectural studies, development studies. It's as far as the smaller stuff that Mr. Knight named, that's great. We can't afford them. We do a 5-year plan every year. It never stays the same. It changes. We could do a strategic plan. It doesn't matter. We're cutting everything. We're just cutting and cutting. And I'm not saying that's wrong. As a resident, I'm very happy with our town and how it's run. But as a manager, I can tell you we're cutting, and cutting. I do believe that, looking at the mostly volunteer firefighting towns that we're surrounded by, they support their volunteers a lot more than we do. Again, they don't have a paid staff. And so these are all things to weigh down the road.
I really was a that idea of a single station. I think we talked about it a little bit when we got a draft of it. I think it has a lot of potential. Obviously, it's a long-term solution, not like you said, probably the 10 years next year, 5-year thing, but I think it makes a lot of sense, both from just a very practical policy standpoint to improve the efficiency, providing coverage to town, but as you mentioned, it would also free up some pretty valuable commercial real estate as well for economic development. It was good to hear that. Maybe just one other thing, kind of keying off the last thing you had mentioned, Brian. I believe in this study there was a section about efforts to, retain volunteers or improve volunteerism. Mr. Knight, could you speak at all to that?
Sure, but I'll measure it right from the get-go. And we typically say this as a firm. There are definite strategies, and we provided a resource that the International Association of Fire Chiefs put out associated with recruitment and retention across the country. And we certainly will, provide any recommendations we have to the department. The challenge that most communities have is, let's just say option A works in one community, but that same option won't work in another community, right? Your socioeconomics, your demographics, age brackets, there's a lot of things that go into successful volunteerism. And what we're seeing around the country is that volunteerism is not only down in the fire and emergency services, but it's down in all sectors. It's down in hospitals and churches and other areas. So, as you link elements like the economy, working multiple jobs, how far you commute to work, all those kinds of things weigh in on the success or not of recruitment and retention of volunteerism. So I say all that to say, if anybody tells you they have a silver bullet for that, I think they're pulling your leg. But I think the department is certainly considerate of that. And many times what we find is, there might be some financial incentives and some bumps along the road that you can introduce to help with that. But many times the word on the street has a lot of influence on recruitment and retention as well. So the reputation of the fire department, the leadership, et cetera, depending on what the general consensus is among the group that are looking for volunteer opportunities or career opportunities, that kind of reputation goes a long way. So that's something to certainly work on if you get the sense that that's contributing.
Thank you. Councilor Moran.
Just one question. How much it's Stephen, Brian, or Chief Lytle question, maybe I'll. I think this contains some obviously great information, great sort of things that we could look to move towards, things we could implement. Obviously, it's a tough, budget year, money's constrained, but just for the sort of benefit of the public, could any of you speak to sort of like the current, confidence level we should have? I think we have a great fire department as far as public safety goes right now with what we have.
I think it's the best in the region. And bar none, it's the best in the region. No, it's well funded. but the best in the region.
Yeah.
Even if it weren't.
Yeah.
We all sleep well at night, knowing Chief Lytle and Chief Dogen and Chief Indemeyer, who's here. He doesn't come here a lot. Hi, Doug. He's out there. I've seen him out on scenes at 3 a.m. He's just fantastic and sleep very, very, very well, knowing they're protecting us. And I don't say that with any sort of sugarcoating. I mean that.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I mean, I have to agree, obviously, that we have a great department and, we'll always continue to improve with, things that are within our control and also when we can start, to finance these things. But as we consider these things, which I think are fantastic, just for, the benefit of the public, I think it's important to remember, we do have excellent, sort of fire and emergency coverage. And so I just want to thank all the chiefs that are here in the whole department. So thank you for that.
Really agree, and just to build on that, I mean, I think I saw some people in the room now responding to a call on my way home this afternoon, and they're already here, supporting this town council discussion. So truly, an excellent, both volunteer and professional force. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a
Yep.
quick question just on when you, so to the town manager, you had referenced, maybe this was Chief Lytle also, you had referenced that some other towns provide additional support or other support to volunteers. Is this a monetary thing or are there other supporting mechanisms that can be
In
provided?
the simplest of terms, tax breaks, tax incentives,
Okay,
in
okay.
regards to volunteers. And again, they don't
Okay.
have paid staff.
So that's how they
Yep.
help that,
Yep.
okay. Okay, that's what I wanted to know, and that would be, so it does come at a cost to the town, but it's something that is not a salary or a stipend directly.
Right.
Okay. And so is there a way for us to analyze, well, there is a way for us to analyze that, but that's something that the council would consider looking at as far as the possible impact?
We look at it every year, if I can jump in.
Okay.
We just increased something last year, I believe you did. The council did, and so we do the best we can, but keep in mind, we have a paid and a
Yep.
volunteer, so it's difficult to do the full incentives when we have so much money going on to the paid side as well. But I completely recognize that our volunteers probably do not get as much as the other towns get to give to their volunteers.
Okay. And I understand that that's not a magic bullet, as Mr. Knight said, right? Because the idea that volunteerism is generally down, which is a different
I'll keep trying to push the needle
economic. Okay.
on the volunteers to get them more and more.
Yeah, and if there are programs that I think you would entertain discussing any and all options for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. They do have an Explorers, that's correct, that's exactly.
Chief Lytle has revitalized the Explorer program, I believe last year, so and with some great success.
Yeah.
We have full-time career firefighters that came right out of our Explorer program, which is the goal. So
Excellent. Just a very clarifying question on that. In terms of tax breaks, is this like a property tax break or is it more of a state program that we could apply to?
no property.
Okay.
It depends. There's all sorts of programs out there, but that's in a nutshell, the basic.
Okay.
X amount of calls, X amount of time, X amount of tax break kind of thing.
Does Tolland do that or we?
What do we have, John, that we just increased?
We have the volunteer stipend, which is so many calls every 3 months, and we also have a volunteer retirement incentive that was started in 2001. But you have to make 3 out of the 4 quarters. That gets split at the end of the year, but it's only 500. We've looked at the tax breaks. We've looked at the other stuff. Like Brian says, we've done studies through Prague and to see what the other towns, and we try to revisit that all the time. Sometimes submit their state that info back and sometimes don't, but you gotta look at 3 different options and then you have to look at it, obviously, where the money pit is and which option, where do you go with stuff. The option's better, but takes away from the taxes as well.
Just to clarify, Chief, so what we currently have now is if the volunteers have put in X number of hours or responded to X number of calls, whatever it is, in a 3-month period, is that what you said they qualify for the stipend?
There's a separate like firefighter, EMT, fire police, and then it goes up through officer rank and pay.
Okay.
And then a lot of memberships, that's how we try to increase someone coming in as an EMT, hey, take a fire. So a lot of times we try to push that dual, cert. So then this way here, we're running minimal crews, yeah, at least you got, you know, you can kind of shift people around.
And how much is it?
And don't quote me, I think it's up to 350
$350.
per, position wise.
Okay.
From an EMT to a fire, and then we have an ambulance, stipend call, that if they pull so many hours, nights, weekends, and they get that extra stipend as well.
Thank you.
And that's the one that we increased last year, I think we're trying to.
$350.
150 just for a stipend, but that's so many shifts, so many calls
Yep.
for 30 days.
And the 350 was for the 3-month period.
3 months,
3-month period.
depending on how many calls, and they have to pull a percentage of 15% to meet the activity requirement. They have to be in those call volumes for 50%. Kind of hard when you're running 200 calls a month.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on the study?
Just an observation, this is, my family has had the unfortunate, so not by you, but we have had some things happen that have been unfortunate, but have had the good fortune to have had excellent response by Tolland Emergency Services and Fire for several different issues. This is the kind of thing that you don't use or need until you do need it, right? So this is something that sits in the background and just operates, and most people don't use it, or you know, they may see it during parades and they may see it, but it just sits there, and it's a quiet competence, and it's available to every resident, and nobody asks somebody puts out their hand before they respond to an emergency and says, you know, you have to pay me, you have to whatever, what do you owe, right? This is something that's just available to every single citizen here. So I just wanted to emphasize that this is the kind of thing that people don't necessarily, their eyes aren't on it until they need it, and it's absolutely invaluable in our community. So
Thank you, sorry.
Core function.
absolutely core function, and it's the kind of thing that you don't, people take for granted, right? Things, because a lot of things like this in local government just work, right? And it just keeps working. So until you need it, and it's an emergency, or your house is on fire, or it's life or death, or you have an accident or a chimney fire, then all of a sudden it becomes the most important thing in your life.
Oh, Mr. Joe, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just one or two questions. So, I do like this report. I think it's, and I also like the fact that it sort of segregates sort of timelines where, you know, we could potentially implement and improve things. Which I think is really nice and handy, because it gives us an opportunity to sort of plan further ahead than 2 years. You know, we can look out 10+ years, which is a great thing in this report, I think. The question I have is based, and I know there's a struggle here, obviously, for resources, but based on what's generated in this report, there's a, you know, significant difference when it talks about non-staffed response times versus fully staffed response times. And then the call for 24/7 coverage. Based on our current resources, is there any way to reallocate the resources to be more effective in the non-staff times, to try to bring these times down, which are really high? I just don't know if that's part of the strategy to improve response times.
There was some of that in the study.
Yeah.
About the chief's looking at that, about shuffling the deck with staff to improve on that. I believe Steve had covered that early to some degree about shuffling the deck.
Yeah, he was he wasn't very specific about it. I just wasn't sure, because it says bringing on 4.5 additional staff people to kind of get this full coverage 24/7. But I'm just wondering, short term, because I think the 4.5 people is like looking out 4 or 5 years, something like that. But I'm just wondering if there's anything to do currently to help to improve the response time during the non-staffed hours, which,
You know,
I don't know if the specifics were brought up in the
You I have asked the chief to explore a 24 on, 2 off schedule, which a lot of the fire departments do. But that's a pretty heavy lift, but we'll certainly look at that. I think that we could achieve some savings and some stretch there. That's a major commitment and a major move, and it'll take a lot of thought to do that, to go to 24. What I can say anecdotally is the fire departments that I know, like Hartford and others, they love it. But that might not be the case here, so something to look at.
Hey, that's all I got.
Okay, sorry. Councilor Yudichak.
So I don't know if Megan or Steve, because this is your thing. So we've talked several times about the Safer grant, and when we weren't awarded a couple years ago, when the intent was, we talked about it. If we had won it, we would have 2 more, and you thought at that time that sounded like a good number. Is there anything that you're looking at that's similar that's out there being offered? I know Tolland is a different type of town, and that's why we didn't win it last time. But I don't know if that's something that is still out there that we could look into, and maybe, if I remember right, if you won the grant, Chief would tell you to correct me if I'm wrong, because a lot of people weren't here then. I think I was the only one. That if we had won it, it would be at no cost, but we'd have to pick up the tab and keep those firefighter EMTs. We're gonna just fire them and say it's over. So that way it helps you build into some sort of plan. And I think at that time we picked, I think 3. Is there stuff like that still out there that maybe Megan, you might know about, or Steve might know as ideas?
Yeah,
That?
absolutely. And the chief, I'm sure, is well versed. The Safer grant is still there. The federal government has opened that back up, to my understanding, from the freezes that occurred a couple of months ago. You just have to stay up with what the current requirements are. I believe as it stands today, the grant would fund positions for the full 3 years, and then the township would be responsible to pick it up from there.
I can't remember if there was something. I would have to look at my notes, but that's just I always like to drive the council crazy, because I continually remind them of that if we had won it, we would have those firefighters. And now we're like, and again, this year is extremely tough. But to Brian's, he just mentioned something earlier. I mean, we're expecting more businesses in town, and hopefully that will generate, Brian, some revenue into, and we can start maybe thinking about it that way. Or I'm sure there's a lot of different solutions that the future councils can talk about.
A lot of people counting, a lot of departments counting on those extra businesses.
Yeah.
coming to town.
Yeah, we really are.
Don't we know it?
Megan, you looked like you were about to say something.
so-
I don't know if you had anything to add.
No, I mean, he covered it. There's usually quite a few grant opportunities through FEMA, but I'm not really up to date on where it is with all the federal funding. I know FEMA took a pretty good hit, so that was all I was gonna say.
She applies for a lot of public safety grants. What other ones do we have? I think Florida of Johns gets a stipend every year or two.
Emergency management,
Yep.
Homeland Security.
Yeah, all grant funded, so.
No, Megan does a great job. I'm not saying that,
I think, Carl, you worked on the Safer grant last time.
Yeah, the Safer grant is the only personnel funding grant that's out there. It's large enough to do what departments need.
So
The
into
rest of it's equipment related.
the communications you guys approved last year, and it with 3 towns trying to do that regional communications grant to pull up our communications, so we applied with that 3 other towns. So, but we've applied 4 times for the air packs, and we were turned down.
It's highly competitive.
yeah, I can't remember why we did not win it last time. Do you, Brian? I think you just started.
I don't remember the reason.
And do you remember the reason? I thought it was,
Don't know, because we were coached pretty well from 2 other towns that received the Safer grant.
yeah. I know.
I think it was based on need, if I remember, that other towns needed
Yeah,
more than us.
something like,
X amount is a competitive grant.
something like that. But anyways, there are just other options out there. But anyways, I think that's all.
So let's call for questions.
I just have one more observation. I'm looking at page 23 of the 83 of our report, and I'm looking at transports, destination, and at hospital times. So an enormous, and this is a little bit off of the current topic, but an enormous number, so 62.2% of the calls go to either Rockville or Manchester Memorial Hospital, with a small number going to Johnson or Wyndham. And only 20%, and so only 30%, a little over 30%, so almost 70% going to local regional hospitals that are all targeted continuously for either closing or reduction in services. And if you look at the times that these people spend that it takes to transport, and the time that the average in hospital time, or what you call wall time, it's significant. It's a significant reduction. So if there's ever a reason for us to encourage public policy, especially at the state level, to maintain public medical or regional medical facilities, the statistics are right in front of us. And if you're having a heart attack, it matters, or a stroke, it matters a lot.
But just maybe a dumb question, but what is wall time?
Sure. It's the time spent at the hospital trying to transition. It's a combination the way we did it. It's a combination of the time that it takes to transfer the patient from your stretcher to the hospital staff. And then baked into the way we did the analysis also includes the time that the crews remain at the hospital before they go available. So there's two different components with that. Agencies that are getting really aggressive about measuring the component of the hospital's contingency or what they're responsible for, are starting to capture a CAD timestamp, if you will, when they say, okay, we've transferred the patient to the hospital, so that you have a clearer distinction of what's the hospital's responsibility and what's maybe the personnel obligation.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Steve, for coming here and giving us an excellent overview of the study.
If any of the staff that took the time to have questions.
I could open it up, Brian, if you're doing that. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions or comments, staff? Yeah.
I know these points have been touched on, but I'd like to touch on them more. This study, whether it's implemented or recommended or whatever, does, to me at least, rely on two major assumptions. One of those was touched on by Mr. Foley, the considerable financial considerations that were constraints that we're under, but two is the staffing levels that are plaguing not only Tolland, but fire departments nationwide. All departments are continuing to see continuous steady drop in memberships. And how are we to adopt these levels recommended in the study if Tolland and all departments continue to see drop in membership? If Tolland doesn't have the members to show up to calls, no staffing needs, we can't maintain levels. That's it. And this study relies on certain staffing levels. And if we can't maintain that, then they're going to numbers. So that's the quandary. Where do we go from there? I know there's not a good answer to that, but if and when the study is implemented, this is going to have to, take into consideration major constraints that Tolland is under now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think it's voluntary, and it's just difficult in general.
Yeah, I'm even for running for office and certified they're volunteering for anything. This has become really, really challenging.
That's what I'm saying, but yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
saying that, because sometimes we say it all the time, but other people aren't doing it, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's either a community runs on volunteers, like you see most of our commissions running on volunteers, right? Or you pay. So it's one or the other, or you go without services, so.
that's what it's all about.
You know, Lisa, wonderful clerk, get your name, just the minutes.
Sorry? Oh,
Talk louder.
it's John,
Sorry, no, I don't see that yet.
my name is John J. Wine. Sorry?
Repeat that, please.
My first name is John J. Wine.
Yeah.
I'm on Dairy Farm in Tolland.
Thank you.
I'll just emphasize what both Colleen and Marilee said as far as volunteerism. I've talked to Jim Toomey with CERT. I know, like, you know, they're volunteers. We rely on them for things. They struggle to find volunteers. And so there's a lot of aspects of our town that rely on volunteers. And in some ways, the town couldn't operate without that. So we certainly owe a debt of gratitude to that. And, you know, it is something that, you know, we and other departments struggle with. And so it's definitely something that we're going to have to keep in mind as we go forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, again, thank you, Mr. Knight, for coming here, and also thank you to Fitch for working on putting this study together, and all of our staff who cooperated with that. It'll be a great resource. As I mentioned, you know, regardless of the financial, you know, implications, there's a lot of good data up in here and goals to reach for, and I think we should definitely continue to reference this document and see what we can do to build upon the good work our fire department already does do.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that brings us to item 8.2, which is consideration of a resolution making an 824 referral to planning and zoning for the Route 195 sidewalk and safety improvements project. I believe Megan, do this one up for us.
Yes, so thank you. Megan is here. As you know, there's a draft resolution attached, and we want to connect the green to our business district, as we brushed upon earlier. The sidewalk through the bottleneck here, south and east of Old Post Road, down to basically the Papatee's Plaza down there. That bottleneck area, everybody here has seen wheelchairs going up and down that hill at all hours of the night. You know, kids on bikes going through there during rush hour, and that stretch of road, to include last night, sees not that exact stretch, but that 195 Merrill Road sees fatalities. And so this is an opportunity not just for the ADA improvements, but general safety improvements. The town, do not want to pay for this project at all. We would like to do it through lots of funding and grant funding. We do not have the money to pay for it. So the only way we would do this is if we were to get lots of funding. If we were to, and it were to go to design, it wouldn't just be about sidewalks, it'd be about lighting and signage and general safety in that area as well, which I would rely heavily upon our local traffic authority and Chief Vitale, who already handles a lot of that stuff to begin with. So this is a technical requirement that it needs to go to 824 to zoning, and with that, I have Megan Moss.
So you're probably gonna hear a lot about this project as I go through the process. So planning and zoning requested that I bring this to their June 9th meeting. And I don't know if that we always do a town council referral to planning and zoning, but I don't think it's a bad idea with a project of this size that we follow the same process that we did for the sidewalks on the green and make that official referral. Also through this process, I'm going to meet with the Commission on People with Disabilities and give the same presentation on what's being proposed. DOT really likes to see that we've engaged all stakeholders and that we have that kind of support, and it'll really help our application. So, and then, like I said, I'll be back here again before we apply. Usually there's specific wording that they want to see in a resolution to apply. So I really want to wait for that guidance to come out and make sure that we have that worded properly, and that'll be back again in the fall.
We've reached out, communicated with the businesses and homes in the area, I believe twice now. I had good communication with several.
Just a clarifying question. This is a process where they review it, they do come back with a recommendation, but the council could override it, I believe, with
2/3.
2/3 majority.
Mhm.
Yes, okay. Councilor Rain?
Just two comments. One, I think it's a good idea, obviously, to refer it to planning and zoning. Councilor Beebe knows this better than I, but when I was the liaison, they certainly were emphasizing the working collaboratively with the council of planning and zoning, so I think it's great that we're getting them involved as early as we can.
Agreed.
And then the second thing is just, you know, again, thank you for all you do, Megan, with all of the grants and project management. Got a lot on your plate and, you know, we really appreciate it because you bring in funds that we desperately need. So thank you.
I would add that, please emphasize, or let's emphasize us to the public, but also to the Planning and Zoning Commission that the pathway that's shown here, the sidewalk that's shown here is part of a larger town sidewalk pathways plan that was adopted 30 years ago, maybe, a long time ago. And that is on the wall in front of the planning office, that we've looked at and really we picked away a tiny little pieces of it, but it was envisioned a long time ago as a way to connect our community and to connect critical components of our community, town center, commercial, seniors. And this is a really important piece of that. So it fulfills the plan that the town has had for decades. Thank you.
Questions, comments? I'll entertain a motion to adopt the draft resolution as written, item 2. So moved. Is there a second?
Second,
Any discussion? Okay, go online first, Counselor Buckler,
Aye.
Counselor Yuchek.
Aye.
Counselor Moran. Aye. Counselor Shay. Aye. Counselor Beebe.
aye.
I'm an aye as well, so that resolution passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, this brings us to item 8.3, appointments to vacancies or appointments to fill vacancies on boards and commissions.
Yeah, I'll just say, Joe had made the suggestion to reach out, when we last talked about the technology advisory board to the members of that board. And the response back was that, they're pretty resounding, they wanted to keep the technology advisory board. So, love to have, you know, volunteers in whatever capacity. So, I think all of their terms expire at the same time. So.
They do, still waiting to hear from 3, so there's 4 to approve tonight,
Okay,
outstanding that I haven't heard from 3, so I'll continue to reach out.
So 7 total.
There's
so certainly I would recommend approving the 4 people that are on for tonight.
I've got it. If you want.
You're the individuals?
So, yeah.
Yeah,
Is it that one?
so that was Sean Ball, Kyle Daigle, Andy Powell, and Michael Pennington. Okay, so it would be the approval of those 4 individuals for another 2-year.
I'll entertain a motion to appoint them.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Counselor Buckler,
Aye.
Counselor Yuchek.
Aye.
Counselor Moran. Aye. Counselor Shay.
Aye.
Counselor Beebe.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, so they are reappointed. It takes us out of new business. There is no old business. But I get 10 report of the town manager.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, some of you may know or don't know, there was a fatal motorcycle versus car last night on Merrill Road, southeast of this location. And it was a Tolland resident, Tolland High School graduate, soccer player. So a lot of people in town are hurting, especially a family over down off of 74. Tyler West, he was 21. I thank again Chief Lytle and the staff and Rasher were out there last night. I know this is difficult, as I believe he was one of our explorers at one point as well. So known to a lot of the staff, so I really appreciate it. I'm sorry to the friends and family, but I also thank our first responders, fire, EMS, and state police for their work involved in this. Moving on, there is the state trooper contract is up for renewal. It pops up every 2 years, you know, as I have a beef with the lack of data that is provided. So I'm gonna try to stretch and see what I can get done over with this contract. And also, I'm gonna certainly wait until the budget is approved before I sign the contract. I'll have, as usual, Mike Wilkinson, our HR guy, and Rick, our attorney, look it over as well. I want to thank the PCC for the Memorial Day Parade and the Veterans Commission, just an outstanding job all around. Everybody that was involved, all our departments that were involved, did a great job. The new setup on the green, I think, was a big hit, but most of all, I want to thank Dr. Willett and his staff for the new band director, putting that person in place, and having the high school band at our parade for the first time in a long time out there marching in the parade, and then actively involved in the ceremony from playing of taps, God Bless America, and was there a national anthem?
No, she sang a cappella.
Okay, but she sang the national.
She sang the.
Right, yes, there was national. Okay, so they were involved in all steps. So great to have them there. And it was a busy day on the green that day. As you know, we had our farmers market, and the Lions Club had their pancake breakfast, and then the parade as well. So there was great coordination between our volunteers at the market, the Lions, and then the parade. Everything went off without a hitch. I thank the counselors who came and marched. As you know, Bruce Watt, our recreation director, has submitted his resignation, and he is going on to another town. I will tell you that he is going on to another town to a lesser role. He is a director here. He's moving on to be an assistant director. The assistant director job he's moving to pays about $20,000 or more to where he's going. As we go to budget time here, and I've said it before, Tolland pays not a lot of it's a lot of money, I'm sure, to our residents and everything, but we pay less than most towns in most positions, is what we find. We are working actively with the rec department as we're jumping right into summer rec season here, to make sure there's a smooth transition. The job was posted today. I meet with Bruce and his staff, I believe, on Thursday to start going over actual steps of the transition to ensure it's smooth. I do have great confidence that we will have a great pool of candidates applying for this job, because in the end, it's a rec director in the town of Tolland, which is pretty cool if you're looking to be a rec director as a career. The senior center, the pickleball court, paid for by ARPA funds and private donation, has been paved, so it's basically laid out and getting near completion over there. The accreditation process, in order for the town of Tolland to hire an SRO, or down the road constables, police officers, we have to be accredited through the state of Connecticut and post Police Officer Standard Training Council. We have signed a contract with an accreditation manager. Basically, we will pay for it out of excess from the state police fund this year. We're paying it on the town side. You know, there might have been a chance that the Board of Ed would pay for it, but being that it would benefit us in regards to hiring constables down the road and other matters, we are going to pay for the accreditation, and then we can assist in my office on getting the town accredited so that we can hire an SRO, hopefully prior to the start of the school year. And I believe there's already an application or two popping in. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. is the Tolland Tykes graduation in the rec center. I will be there. If the council wants to come and pop in, it's usually big fun. You can see online there's some starting to get the complaints about the DPW and the field issues. I will tell you that we're down a DPW staff worker that was cut 3 years ago and told that we were going to get that person back in the following year's budget. And with this budget failing, now we're looking at cutting another one. So I say to the residents, please be patient. We are currently not filling an open vacancy as a result of the potential for budget, as we do have we have an open filled an approved spot for DPW, a funded spot for DPW that we want to hire for, but we're going to wait till the end of the budget process to see if we can. If not, likely there's a chance that it could not be filled. And again, we want to keep up, and we'll take care of it as best we can. The issues get forwarded immediately to DPW by multiple staff, and we're doing the best we can. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for town manager?
Well, I just wanted to know what type of issues are kind of popping up. Is this just maintenance issues?
Yes.
Okay.
Grass aside.
Grass, okay.
Councilor Yudichak, did you have something?
I just had, we received the email from a resident about the absentee ballots. Are we, I don't know if you remember responding to it, Brian, but are we getting them a day earlier? I thought I saw an email that.
They're here. They
We
came
got 'em.
today.
I think we already sent 8 out.
Issued a few.
Yeah, 8, sent 8 out today.
Is there like a e-blast that went out to residents or did I miss?
Yes.
I think there was.
I missed that. That's very efficient.
And I responded to the resident.
What's that?
I responded to the resident. I don't know if I CC'd you guys.
No, alright, so. Where's everybody's?
Anything else? That brings us to item 11, adoption of minutes. Minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Great. Councilor Buckler,
Aye.
Councilor Yudichak,
I,
Councilor Moran,
Aye.
Councilor Shay,
Aye.
Councilor Beebe,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Minutes are adopted. Correspondence to council, Councilor Yudichak.
sure, so recently, last few weeks, we've received a total of 21 emails regarding the budget, one regarding the absentee ballots, one regarding Earth Day, and one regarding the tennis courts.
Thank you. Chairperson's report. I've got a couple of things today. First, I do want to thank everyone who put on the parade and marched in the parade for all their hard work. Unfortunately, I had a family commitment that day, so I wasn't able to march, but I'm glad that it seems like it went well by all accounts. And yeah, it's a great thing to do to honor all those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. So thank you to all who worked on that. Also, just like to remind everyone to vote on June 3rd, I believe, a week from today. And then also, again, just kind of our condolences to Mr. West and his family and loved ones during this very difficult time. And thank you to all of our first responders for responding to that. Right. Communications and petitions from council persons. Councilor Moran?
I'll just quickly echo a few things that were said. For the Memorial Day Parade, it was fantastic. Thank you to the BCC, the Veterans Recognition Commission, CERT, all the volunteers, public safety and town that made it happen. I agree that I think moving the ceremony at the end to the green was a great idea. It makes it more likely that more people will attend. I think that was fantastic. I'll just echo, obviously, the loss of Bruce Watt will certainly be felt by the town, but wish him well in his future opportunities. And then I'll just echo what Jacob just said, a reminder that the referendum is a week from today, July 3rd.
June 3rd.
June 3rd, thank you.
I'm sure Chris just, I should have told him, and I didn't do it either. I want to thank our U.S. federal magistrate,
Absolutely.
Mr. Farish and Kate Farish for all they do to help with the ceremonies as well too. So they're not on any of the committees, they just do it out of the kindness of their heart. So I thank them as well.
Thank you.
Volunteers.
Yeah.
Mhm. Great. Any other communications? Councilor Phoebe?
So I ditto on the ceremony. It was one of the nicest ceremonies I've attended. So thank you to the Farishes again for it was elegantly handled. A couple people had reached out to me in terms of this whole budget process, and one of the things that I know we've talked about and that the town manager has emphasized is the services that we share with other towns, the way that we combine with communities. So we share IT services with South Windsor. We're looking at sharing animal control services. This is a much different environment than it was, a couple of decades ago, where a lot of this stuff was just centrally located in Tolland. Could we moving forward get just a brief summary, and I'm not asking it for it right this minute, but something that we could promote and share more aggressively with the townspeople so that they do understand that we are cooperating regionally and we are kind of spreading that cost among multiple towns. So IT, obviously animal control, we're in the E-chip with our insurance and we're collaborating that way. If there's anything
I
else.
believe there is in the council goals. And I apologize, you might not have seen them, which is coming up on the agenda. I believe there is a section, one of your council goals is on collaboration, and that'll have a detailed description of what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep, no, it's not something that I expected for tonight.
Yep.
Just knowing that we can get it moving forward, that's really helpful. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to public listed participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council. There is a 3-minute time limit. I'll go to the room first. I'll go online. Back to the room. Go online. Oh, sorry. Yes, George.
I knew you were expecting that. George Alberts, Fish and Game Road. I'd just like to point out again, nice to have and need to have fire, police, roads, schools. Everything else is nice to have. So, in all due respect to people complaining about the grass, that's a nice to have. And if you don't like it, then get out there with your own mower and mow it yourself. So we have to concentrate on a very limited budget where we spend it. Yeah, so we need to concentrate on need to have. That's nice.
Thank you. I'll go, I think I was online. Anybody online? Go back to the room. Go online one more time. Back to the room one more time. Seeing none, we'll end public participation. Is there any objection to adjournment? Being none. Meeting is adjourned at 8:33 p.m. Thank you, everybody.